All right. Episode 20 of Lizard Brain Radio. And we are going to talk to Nipper Reed, who is running a little bit late, so we will wait for him. Nipper is based in the UK. That's why the time difference for you folks that are watching and listening live. He is a field herper. And if you have listened to the Herpetoculture Network or Morelia Python Radio Network, he's a pretty popular figure among those folks. He is a really experienced field herper, has seen and photographed nearly every species in Europe. I actually was making a post on Facebook, and I really love legless lizards, and I was fortunate to get a Madagascar legless lizard. I also have a European, and I shared a picture and said, I'd really love to speak to somebody who was into legless lizards. And didn't really get much feedback from that. And Nipper commented and said, he had seen legless lizards, European legless lizards, in the wild. And I was like, oh man, of course, that would be the person. I had seen and heard him talk on different podcasts about his experiences field herping, and I knew that he had that huge, extensive species list. It just kind of, I don't know. I don't know if this podcast is like that popular, I guess. I don't know. It never occurs to me to ask people that I know are a big deal to me. And so I think his resume for field herping is really impressive, and I'm super excited he wanted to talk about it, and especially that he had experience with the actual lizards I was specifically asking about. I thought that was really cool. So I'm actually fairly sure our live audience today will be a little bit smaller. I know a ton of folks that I normally interact with are probably at Daytona. Judging from some of the pictures I saw on social media, some of you might still be in line. Who knows? It looked like it was a pretty massive event, had tons and tons of people, so that's pretty exciting. I have already seen pictures of things that people bought. I'm super jealous that I didn't go. So I look forward to seeing even more pictures and even more jealousy while I was hanging at home doing the responsible thing, not spending a bunch of money to hang out in Florida with all my friends. I did have corn snakes hatch, which was pretty cool. I know that's not very lizard related. We had a corn snake that was left to us via an adoption route. Teresa and I are still involved with that kind of thing. And of course, the looked a little fat, but we had been told that it had never been with a male, so on and so forth. Folks that do rescue know that story very well. And I had told my wife that, it looks a little fat and it's a female. I don't know if I totally buy that, it's had never been with a boy. Oh, yeah, no, I'm sure. And we had it for maybe a week. And I put it in a bag. We went to a show, and it's a beautiful colored corn snake. So I was like, it'd be great, show kids. And I was walking with the tortoise at a big public event that we were doing, and Teresa came over and said, hey, you need to go look in the bag, and we need to set it somewhere, out of sight and safe. I'm like, okay. And I opened the bag, and there's 3 eggs in there with a corn snake just staring at me, clearly very uncomfortable. 2 of those eggs made it. That was far from an ideal situation for eggs, and have since hatched. So one of them hatched yesterday, and the other hatched today. So that was pretty cool. Put a couple of pictures up showing some little faces coming out of eggs. That's always fun. And then Teresa and I recently took in 2 different alligators for our shows. And when I was doing that, hello, Jennifer. When I was doing that, one of those alligators came from Wisconsin, folks with the Madison Herpetological Society, which is pretty cool. And I was able to get a Madagascar velvet gecko at the same time. So it's pretty neat. And I feed grub pie and different things like that. I just try it to see who will take it. And that little monster took it off the tongs and almost took the tongs with it. So that was pretty cool. And then at that same time was Sewer Fest, which is a really popular show here in southern Wisconsin. And I was able to get a Pictus gecko from Wally Kern. So I was pretty happy with that. That's pretty neat. And actually, Wally will be coming up here. I will look at the calendar and tell you guys. Scroll. Let's see. October 3rd is when I will talk to him. I actually have folks scheduled to come hang out and talk with us all the way into November. So that's pretty cool that the reach of the podcast is thanks, Mike. The reach of the podcast is actually quite a bit more than I really ever thought it would be. And the download statistics are fantastic. And I think a fair chunk of that is because the folks at Herpetoculture Network asked me to join up with them. And obviously they have a very large viewership. So it's been really cool. And I know they are down at Daytona with the Herpetoculture magazine, setting up a table, doing all kinds of fun stuff. I am very sorry that I'm missing it. Let's see what Nipper is doing. Sent me a cool picture. So I made that his thumbnail. That's pretty sweet. I don't know. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, man. The only problem is I keep expanding my guest list, and now I'm trying to organize interviews with folks in different countries, and it's getting all crazy. It worked out okay with Scott and Ty. We had to try and figure out all these European and Australian folks are talking to us from the future. So at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night doesn't always jive for them. And so we're hanging out here on a Sunday afternoon, waiting to hear back from Nipper. It's later on in the evening for them, so we'll see how that goes. And actually, since Mike Stefani is in the chat, when you guys come to NARBC in October, for those folks that are coming to that, I think he's going to have a ton of really cool stuff. That's gonna. I'm really excited to see him again and see his setup. I've been using the Zoopoxy stuff that he uses for his enclosures. It's turned out awesome. I'm going to have some updates coming up on Facebook for how we're doing with the big iguana enclosure for that. And then Mike has been killing it with monitors. So I can't wait to go to NARBC and see all the stuff that he's going to have. I'm pretty fortunate that show is local to me, and so is he, relatively speaking. So I get to see that quite often. It'd be pretty cool. So we will see what we will see. We got dudes in the chat hatching Mertens monitors, and I'm over here making a Facebook post because I hatched 2 corn snakes. Like, oh, I have corn snakes. No big deal. It'll be fun. Let's see. Who else is on our list coming up? Joe Hupp. That'll be a while. That one's going to be in November. Very excited to talk to him. Super glad he agreed. That dude has bred and kept every gecko I've ever heard of, and quite a few that I definitely have not heard of. So, actually, Philip Lates, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's Arids only on Instagram. I'm going to be talking to him coming up. I found him through Desert Gem Herps, who I also interviewed, Michael Rodriguez, on Instagram. And they both keep, of course, tons of desert species, Uromastics, and are quite successful with that. So another guy that keeps pretty unique lizard species. I'm really happy to be able to talk to those folks because they keep in a way that's totally different than me. And that's always cool. Like I want to know how they're doing what they're doing and how it is that they are so successful, right? Some places it just lends itself to it, right? All the dudes keeping chameleons in Southern California outside are cheating with us Midwest dorks that have winter. Doesn't always work out. Mike says he will have lots of fresh hatchlings: Mertens, Kingorum, Gilleni, Ackies, Coming Eye, maybe a surprise or two. Man, those Coming Eye waters are ridiculous. The yellow is just insane. I'm so stoked that you got those. That's going to be awesome. The little guys, man, they're fun. I think the for me, the fun for the dwarf monitors is setting them up. It's building all the cool stuff, and then just watching how they live as tiny little monitors. It's the big dudes are cool. You throw them on a leash, you can walk around, so on and so forth. Got a message from Nipper, who is having technical issues, so he will come hang out when he is able. All good. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, the podcast name, I don't know. I just thought it was cool. And when I made the intro, that made sense to me. It's people who had lizards on their mind when they were listening to snake podcasts, right? Nearly every podcast at the time that I made this was snake centric, which kind of makes sense because a huge portion of herpetoculture is snake centric. So I understand that. And I just always thought it was funny that there would be some of us in these live chats or listening to these podcasts, and we would be making comparisons of whatever subject it is they were speaking on. Like, oh yeah, well, you could do this with geckos, or you could do that with a monitor, or so on and so forth. And we clearly were lizard minded in what we were speaking about as we were listening to these subject matter experts in snakes. We just took it in a different way. And it's like, well, why don't I just ask those people to come talk to us? If we're already all on the same wavelength, like, it'd be easier to have our conversation and just start out in that manner, as opposed to trying to adapt snake-centered conversation to what we were trying to do. So far it's worked out really well. It's been pretty cool. And yes, Mike, I think everybody realizes that setting up naturalistic enclosures is what you love, because your enclosures are insane. And by the way, since everybody can, well, if you're live, you can see that Mike is commenting. Folks who are listening to the podcast, you'll have to go check it out. Don't worry, Mike. Teresa is painting kind of how you were talking. She thought it was hilarious that I told her that you were giving her paint tips, and she kind of gave me that look like, I know how to paint. And I was like, no, I'm just trying to be helpful, and talk about shadowing and creating the right texture for the trees and things like that. And yeah, I got a sideways glance when I told her that Mike Stefani wanted to give her some pointers on how to correctly paint those trees. So they are turning out awesome. Well, the funny thing is, she gave me that sideways look, and then our oldest daughter is who finished painting the trees base coat yesterday. Of course, she had to climb inside of that thing, so she came out covered in brown paint. So we'll see. And then Teresa's going to go back and do all the shadowing and layering, so that's going to be pretty cool. I'm telling you what, man, that Zoopoxy stuff, you made me a believer, dude. It ended up really cool. Kind of want to see. I mean, I've seen the monitor species that you house it with, so I'm not worried about getting it torn up. But I'm pretty excited to see an iguana dig into that thing and climb it like a real tree. That's going to be really cool. I think that product could be, well, not could be, it is. It's a big deal for building enclosures for animals that are essentially made to destroy enclosures. And that's always been a big complaint for folks that keep large monitors and large iguanas is, unless you're keeping them outside with, a real tree and a real boulder and just, petting them in with hardware cloth, they'll just trash anything else you put in with them. They're too strong. Their claws are too big, and they're made to dig and tear stuff up. And so having a product that can give someone that natural look without the weight, that's my biggest thing, is because my facility has a full basement. I was always worried about putting super heavy stuff on that first floor. And so having a smaller substrate depth for something like the iguana, I can keep the humidity up. And then my trees are just fairly thin PVC with the Zoopoxy on the outside. And so I was able to cut down that weight massively. And that was kind of one of the big selling points for me. Yeah. Yes. And if you wanted to get Zoopoxy, you could actually get it from Mike. That's what I did. So I thought that was pretty cool. I really like the idea of he's someone who's using it, and then you're able to actually contact the guy. Like, I got the kit from him. I messaged him and said, "Hey, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. What do you think?" And then he kind of talked me through some stuff. And then I was giving him a hard time about the paint thing, but that was the same way. I was like, "Oh, what kind of paint you use, or how'd you do it, and this, that, and the other." And it was as easy as just Facebook messaging somebody that I know. So that was pretty cool, as opposed to buying it at a store or what have you, where it's a little more difficult. Uh-oh, I think we have Nipper. Let's see. Wait, let me add you to the stream so we can hear you. Oh, there we go. Now you're in. How's it going?
It's good, man. Sorry about the delay. A little bit of a technical issue, but we're all sorted now.
No, I was just rambling on. So I made the Facebook post, and before you got here, I was telling folks I am super excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Because, well, I've heard you speak on other podcasts about your experiences in field herping, and then I made that post about legless lizards because I had that Madagascar, and I have a European as well. And when you commented and said you're like, "Oh, I've seen those," it just, I actually told my wife, I was like, "Oh, of course he has." Like that, you've seen tons of stuff, and I just don't think it ever occurs. I mean, I'm sure it does to some folks, but like in U.S. herpetoculture, it's so many things are exotic and foreign to us that and now with social media, it's much easier. We can Facebook message or whatever that you and I could talk, and then for you to be like, "Well, of course I've seen that." It's like, well, yeah, you're and I just think that's awesome that, and it works the flip, right? Like I talked to Scott Eiper, and I've heard you talk before about wanting to come over and go to West Texas and different things.
Mate, I am desperate to come over. I've got so many friends that field herp in America, and unfortunately, at the minute with COVID, I just can't get there.
Right.
But I'm pretty much finished with Europe in that I've seen all but 6 species in Europe now.
That's awesome.
It's taken a while. It's taken about 10 years, but yeah. And the only reason I've got 6 left is the fact that they've recently reclassified some species and split them.
Okay.
So I had less than that, but now a couple of some of the geckos and a couple of lizards have been split. So I now need to go and see them. But my new big thing is rattlesnakes. I need to see, I think there's 32 full species, maybe 35 full species of rattlesnake in the States. And if you count subspecies, there's about 80.
Right.
And I need to see them all, obviously. So when I'm chatting to people from the States, and they go, "Oh yeah, I went out, saw a rattlesnake, blah blah blah," like it's nothing.
Right.
To me, that is just incredible. And yet, talking to American friends, when they say, "Oh, I've just seen a photograph of Vipera aspis or Vipera berus," and I think, "Yeah, that's great. I've got them in the garden. What's the what's the fuss?" Right. It's just where you are, isn't it? It's just what you're used to. Like Scott, as you said, Scott is so bored with seeing carpet pythons.
Yep.
And yet for us, that would be amazing to see a carpet python in the wild.
So I made the post that field herping it's kind of a niche part of herpetoculture I think in the States. There are quite a few folks that do it, but it's more like birding and that kind of thing, where photographing, natural history and different things like that kind of fell to the wayside in the States as the pet keeping part of the culture became more popular. And now it feels like it's trying to go back the other way a little bit, where even for pet keeping, natural history is becoming more important and things like that. And so as folks start to inquire about the natural history, they're starting to realize that there are people that's their hobby, is to go see that. And so I think it's kind of having a little bit of a renaissance now. But why field herping? Like it took 10 years and you've seen so many species. Why? What drove you to want to go see where they're at in the
Always,
wild?
always done field herping.
Okay.
Genuinely, since I was a small child. I come from a military family, so extensively travelled. Um,
Okay.
I was actually born in, although I'm English, I was born in Singapore, and
Oh, wow.
even on a military base, and even there, you've got tokay geckos that live in your house, and you've got big toads that live in the storm drains, and so on and so forth. And my family's always been into travel. So whenever I go on holiday, and I'm talking as a small kid, I'm talking of like, 8, 9, 10 years old, I'd be off looking for, oh, it's always been reptiles, probably the same for you. Dinosaurs, reptiles, it's always been, I do like, I do a bit of birding, but it's always primarily been reptiles and amphibians.
Okay.
And I am incredibly old. So I remember before the internet,
Right.
Jack, I remember before the internet, and it was difficult to meet other people that wanted to go field herping. And
Yeah.
then when the internet started to get a little bit popular in Europe, there was a group called Club 100, and Club 100 got together and they wanted to see, at the time, 100 species in Europe in the wild, which was an insanely huge amount. Who'd have thought you could see that many species in Europe? I mean, it's nothing these days, but at the time it was a big thing. So I started following them and got more and more into it. And as you get a little bit more money, when you get your first job, you start,
Sure.
you can travel more, you can buy a decent camera and so on and so forth. And you meet like-minded people. And I just decided, the chaps, a good friend, Jeroen Spraybook, was the first European to see every European species in the wild.
Wow.
And traveling with him, traveling with the likes of Bobby Bock and Laura Bock, two fantastic European herpetologists, field herpers, who are currently in Costa Rica. He was the first Dutch guy to see every European species. Another chap called Jan van der Voort, who is one of the co-authors of the Bible of European field herping, which is the new European guide. He's another Belgian chap, and that's it. That's the only people that have done it. So currently, I think there are 4 people that have finished every species. So I just decided that was it. That's what I wanted to do. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think I've herped in over 35 countries now. So it's not just if I go to. I mean, I love the Middle East. The Middle East for herping. If you can get out to the Middle East, it's some of the best herping. I've herped Asia, countries in Asia, which again is great. It's all good. And just any day outside is good.
Yep.
But for me, I set myself the goal of seeing all the European stuff, and the experience of doing that has been incredible. Not just the actual seeing the species, but the people you travel with, and you go to places that people wouldn't go to on holiday.
Sure.
I mean, some of the species I've been to, particularly for lizards, I'll give you an example. The Puri Island wall lizard. To get to see that, I had to fly commercial aircraft to Athens, and then get a light aircraft to Cytherea, which is an island in Greece, and then hire a private fishing boat from that tiny island to go out to a sea stack, which was a nightmare to try and get onto the sea stack. We finally managed to get onto the sea stack, climbed up the side of the sea stack, and saw this lizard that I think I was the first British person to ever see it. And you're talking about something the size of what you would call a soccer field. That's its whole distribution in the world. And it's just this one sea stack. It's incredible. So yeah, it's taken me to places that I never thought I'd go to. But having done all the European species, of course, now America beckons. Australia's cool. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to go to Australia. But for me personally, the range of species that you've got in America, I think is far greater than Australia. Australia, because of the nature of it, being an island continent and the evolution, it's got a lot of similar species. But America has got such a massive range of species. Your salamanders are quite unique. Your snakes are quite unique. Your lizards are unique. And for me, I know going forward now, I'll probably have, a few more trips to Europe every year. I'll probably do a couple of trips to Europe every year because there's still subspecies I want to see and just to tick the last remaining species. But from now on, my holidays are going to be the States, 100%.
So is it something where are most of your trips that way, where it's a dedicated trip for that purpose?
Yeah.
Or is it incidental where you're on vacation and you also would like to herp? Or is it a dedicated?
I mean, it's like everybody. There's only so much time and money that you have. So
Yeah.
If my very patient fiance wants a holiday, I will go, oh, let's go to this island. It looks really nice. And it's got nice beaches and restaurants and stuff like that. And it might just happen to have a lizard that I've never seen before on it. So sometimes I'll do that if I'm going with her. Don't get me wrong, she's a great field herper. And she's found some really rare species. It makes me laugh. I mean, she's not that interested, but if you look at her tick list, some of the stuff she's seen, so many field herpers would go mad to try and see it.
Right.
But the majority of my stuff is dedicated field herping trips. So I've got like a core group of people that I'll go with, and we will plan a trip around which species we need to see.
Okay. So Mike Stefani asked, where are you located?
I live near Southend in Essex, so just like 40 minutes from London.
Okay. And so I was going to ask that too.
You can tell Mike that he is going to cost me an awful lot of money because I've been listening to him now, and I want to get myself some dwarf monitors. He's a nightmare. He's so enthusiastic about it. I'm going to have to get some. Eric just messaged me almost every day. Look at this, look at this. So yeah, I'm looking into getting some, and it's his fault.
The funny thing about Mike is, in person, it's the exact same thing.
100%.
At reptile shows, that it just bleeds off to people. And if you see people walk by his table, they don't have any idea what an Aki is, and then they walk by and all of a sudden they're obsessed, and it's because they talk to him. I was going to ask you. You mentioned that you had a core group of friends. So is that?
Yeah.
Do you try to organize that, like a group of buddies are going to go on a trip, or is it just you and the fiance, or?
It depends. To say if it's just a recreational holiday, it'll just be me and my fiance, and I'll incorporate maybe 1 or 2 days field herping into that holiday. For example, she really wants to go to Florida to Disneyland. My idea of hell, but if I go to Florida and do Disneyland, I can meet up with Phil.
Oh man,
and then we can dusky rattlesnakes.
Oh yeah,
gators, just so much great stuff in Florida. So that would be one example. But normally it's the chap, my great friend that I travel with most of all, Trevor. I'll say, right, these are the species, and we'll get together. We'll go on Google Earth. We'll speak to friends. We'll go on iNaturalist and all the sort of things that you normally do. Sure. And then we'll plan our trip according to what species. He's got a great European list as well. So most of our species are the same that we kind of want to see. Work it around in that. When we go on one of those trips, it's purely herping. There's little sleep. There's little stopping for food. It is, let's see as much as we can in the time that we have.
For sure.
Yeah.
And now, so is that, how do I verbalize that? Is that like friends you picked up along the way as you had your field herping experiences, or is this you've known each other for a long time and it turns out you had the same interest type of thing, or how did that culminate?
Yeah, good question. To be fair, I mean, Trevor, slightly different in terms of we were both surveying for Vipera berus in the same area or close to one another. So obviously we had a connection, and then we started talking and we herped in the UK. and then we started herping abroad, and I've known him for years, and it's really important. I mean, he's one of my best friends, but it's really important to have these trips. I mean, you know the score. Field herping trips, they're not relaxing. They're hard work. You're tired, you're hungry, you're thirsty, you're in a car for hours, you know, farts, body odor, and the disappointment of not seeing stuff and lack of sleep and all that. So you've got to go away with somebody that you really get on with.
Right.
I've done trips, and I won't do them again. I've done trips with people that I don't know, where they've come on, they've known that we're organising a trip, and they've messaged and say, "Oh, can I make up a number?" And you think, "Oh, we've got 3 in the car, 4 might be okay," but I don't know anything about them, and it's always been a disaster.
Right.
You've got to really get on with people and have a similar mindset. But yeah, the core group of people that I will go away with are, and it's very strange in terms of a lot of them aren't British. So they're people that I've started talking to on the internet about when they've seen a trip report, or I've seen one of their trip reports and so on. And then you start messaging one another, and then you think, yeah, let's do a trip. You do a trip and it works well, and then you carry on going. So my core group of people are spread out all over Europe, but we will all meet up. We will all meet up in the country that we're going to go and herp.
That's awesome. And so, have you ever done any trips, like more like tour guide trip? Like, I know a lot of folks that go to Costa Rica and that kind of thing. It's more of like a guided tour.
Yeah, I don't. How can I put this nicely? I try and avoid that in terms of without. Oftentimes, the people that guide those trips don't know as much as the people that are on the trips, which can be frustrating.
Sure.
And also, there's the expense of hiring a guide. Sometimes it's unavoidable. There's some places that you can't go without having to hire a guide because it's a legal requirement. And sometimes, if I was going to see a certain species and I was limited for time, I might do it. I did it in Cyprus for the blunt-nosed viper, purely because I only had a really short window. I think I had about 6 or 7 hours spare, and I needed somebody that knew where they were. So there's a very famous chap over there called Snake George who guides people. And I said, look, I just need to see this one species. Can you show me where? And he knows where they're going to be. He knows where they bask. So he could literally take you straight there. But that's a very rare. I did it in Cuba as well, because I was on my own in Cuba. And it's not over safe to travel around some of the places that I wanted to herp. So I had a guide in Cuba. But by and large, no, I wouldn't have a guide.
Okay. And so is it very often that you just on your own going, or do you try to take the buddies or whatever? How do you?
Most of the time, I mean, COVID has killed. COVID is absolutely. I mean, now it's disastrous for the world in all sorts of ways, but more importantly, I can't field herp. This is the longest I've gone without foreign field herping, and it is doing my head in. Wow. My last field herping trip outside, I mean, I've herped in the UK, but my last field herping trip abroad was February 2020. That is, you know, it's just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But normally there's always a group of us ready to go somewhere. I mean, evening, I don't know how they're doing it. Evening club, I've got friends at the minute that are herping Georgia, European Georgia, not Russia, not Georgia. I've got friends in Costa Rica. I've got friends in Afghanistan, which are doing military things but herping at the same time.
Yep.
You know, and I'm stuck here. I can't get anywhere. But, yeah, but normally it'll be a group. It'll either be just me and Trev, which works quite well because there's just 2 of you, so you're very mobile. You haven't got to worry, oh, they're vegetarian, they don't like this, they need to blah, blah, blah. And accommodation's easy to find for 2 people, and 2 people in the car means you can get a lot of kit in the car, and that kind of works. But also, you know, it's not uncommon for us to do a trip with 8 people. It's just who's available at what times.
Oh, wow. That'd be awesome.
As I say, I don't think it's going to happen because America's not letting Europeans in at the moment.
Yeah, I know.
But I was supposed to be going on a trip with a load of the American field herpers in October, but I can't see it happening. But there was 6 people booked for that trip, I believe.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. So everything, or at least to me, everything about field herping is natural history, and you need to have a good understanding of natural history to find these things. And then whenever I see the photographs that most folks take, it literally looks like a natural history textbook. Like this is where they're from, and this is where they do what they do, and I, you get a picture of them drinking or basking or whatever activity is you were fortunate enough to stumble upon. And so, like, growing up, was your education and then work, and are you in the sciences, or is this your hobby and you are not in the sciences?
I've mentioned this before. My first experience, I come from a very urban. My family comes from East London, which is, I don't know, for want of a better word and an analogy, the Bronx. It's a very, it's not the best area of London. It's a very urban area. Yeah.
Okay.
My first, and I can remember this, and I was 4 years old, and trust me, that is an awful long time ago. My granddad took me to the British Natural History Museum.
Yes.
The finest museum in the world. Oh yes.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And different times they had some live displays there. And I can remember as a tiny child, on a table, you could lift up a little jar, and inside the jar was a fire salamander. It was just salamandra. And I don't know if you've seen them before, but it's a very chunky black and vivid yellow striped salamander. It looks like a child's toy. It doesn't look like a real thing. And I can still remember, even to this day, that absolutely blew my mind. There was something alive that looked like this. And from then on, I was fascinated, and I read and read and read everything I could from that age onwards about reptiles and amphibians and dinosaurs and blah, blah, blah. Now, bear in mind, I come from a rougher area. My mates are into football and boxing and all that sort of stuff. And I can't stand football. I like boxing, but I've always been the one that's been into wildlife. And I'm fortunate because my dad's traveled so much. He was always very supportive and took me places. But awesome. when other people were out going to the football matches on a Saturday or whatever, I'd be out with my camera looking for stuff and just researching stuff. For me, my career is nothing to do with that. My career is law enforcement.
Okay.
And again, people, I teach combat and that sort of stuff, and people they find it very funny that somebody that, at some points in their working day is either in body armor or showing people how to restrain or whatever, gets so excited about a tiny little newt that's that big and he's photographing that. It's quite a weird thing. So it's nothing formal. But it's been my interest since I was about 4 years old.
So I had no idea about that, about you. I've only ever heard you talk on the other podcasts, NPR right. and things like that. I'd never heard your background. That that's what I do in my day job.
Oh, great. We'll have a chat off of air.
And you are exactly right. And it's very interesting to go to my office and teach the things that I do and do what I do in my day job. And then I just recently did a birthday or like a was like a block party for one of my coworkers for his kids, and it was one of those where I look like this, and then I brought reptiles to the party and was talking to the kids and so on and so forth. And I teaching is my thing. I really love to teach anything really, but for reptiles it kind of happened that way. And so I sitting in the grass playing with a corn snake or something, with a bunch of elementary school kids, and I get that a lot of, so you hang out and teach kids about frogs and stuff? And it's like, yeah. What do you do in your day job? I teach people about other things. Or we have my wife and I have a petting zoo type facility, and then I also teach combatives and some other stuff in there, just because it's a nice open floor space. And so one of our storage areas, and then underneath some of our seating, is just bins with kickboxing equipment and different things. And so, we'll have a class come through for a walking field trip, and I have a bob for doing kickboxing, and I put one of my reptile t-shirts on him, and he's got a Crocodile Dundee hat. I'm like, oh, what's that for? I'm like, yeah, he models all of our reptile shirts. That's pretty cool. And then every now and again you'll get a parent who's like, I don't think that's what that's for. Yeah.
I love
yes, it is.
I love the way Bob is a universal name in whatever country you're in for that bit of kit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mike, I love when tough guys come to my house, football, boxing, and so on. I pull out a 5-foot Kamingi and they turn to. Yes. I've also had that where lots of people that I work with that are quote unquote hardcore are very, very scared of snakes and frogs and bugs and things like that. Yes. Yeah.
100%.
That's great. I did not know that about you. That's really funny.
Yeah, we'll have a catch up offline.
So you grew up traveling because your dad was in the military. And so how did that, I mean, obviously you were a lot younger, but I mean, did you have a lot of opportunities in those places to get out and do stuff? Or
I came back to the UK very young.
Okay.
We travelled around in the UK, but my dad stayed obviously in the military. But my mum, once I was like small, she wanted to come back to the UK. But obviously he has a love of travelling, so we would travel as a family when he was back.
Awesome. So I do want to know about legless lizards. So tell me about legless lizards. I'm so stoked to, you commented that and I was like, oh, I do know him. Yeah.
We don't have that many species in Europe, and I'm going to probably get this wrong. My chums are going to be shouting at the radio listening to this. I think we've probably got 12 species of completely legless lizard in Europe. And again, some of those have just been or recently been reclassified.
Right.
But we've got from the really, really small legless lizards, like some of the skinks on the Greek islands, to the absolutely enormous glass lizards, which you know those. They are beasts, absolute beasts. I mean, they're quite scary to catch in the wild. I've seen them in quite a few different countries. They tend to be in like Eastern Europe. So you're looking at like the Peloponnese and Montenegro, Macedonia, all over Greece, that sort of area, Bulgaria, Romania, that sort of country. But they are, I mean, for a legless lizard, they're huge. I mean, we're talking a head size, sort of. Where are we? Sort of like that sort of size. They're big things, and they are, because as soon as you grab one, they spaz out.
Yep.
But huge variations in colours as well. I mean, you get a lot of melanistic ones, which are cool to see. I don't know if you know. Have you seen them as juveniles, the glass lizards?
No, I haven't.
But you know, the adults are like a uniform color normally, aren't they? Either
Right.
olive or brown or black or whatever. The juveniles are zebra striped. They look
Oh,
amazing.
wow.
Yeah, and they go through an autogenic change as they get older, but the actual juveniles are incredible. You think it's a completely different species.
Wow.
Habitat, they're quite generalistic in like scrub sort of habitats, and they tend to you tend to find them most under huge the larger flat boulders. So when you're out, and it's quite weird the way Americans field herp is completely different. I have this conversation with people like Rob Stone and all the time. Americans field herp in a completely different way to Europeans.
So I have
And
heard that.
and it's, you know, it's obviously environmental reasons for that, because
Okay.
America is oftentimes a lot hotter than Europe. Not necessarily, but oftentimes a lot hotter than Europe.
Okay.
But if I'm going on a herping trip, I will be up at first light and we will herp all day. And by herp, we will be in suitable habitat, either looking for stuff basking or we'll be flipping rocks and stuff like that. And in a
Okay.
day, I literally flip thousands of rocks. Whereas in America, you tend to field herp at night because of the temperatures and road crews. In Europe Central, hardly any point road cruising. You won't see hardly anything. Everything's done by flipping.
Okay.
Obviously, we will go out at night for nocturnal species like cat snakes and geckos and that sort of thing, but that would be specific to that species. We wouldn't road cruise at all. The only time I road cruise is in the Middle East. So if you're in Egypt or Jordan or Israel, particularly, road cruising works really well.
Okay.
Because there isn't necessarily the stuff to flip because it's a desert sort of environment, but also because the temperatures are so much higher. But yeah, all three, you know, France, Spain, Greece, any of those places, Italy, you'll be flipping stuff over to find stuff. And that's where you're finding the big glass lizards when you're turning over boards or big flat rocks and stuff like that. I mean, they're so big, you can hear them crashing through the undergrowth. So if you flush one and you can hear where it's going, but oftentimes you'll flip something that's quite big and there'll be one underneath, and they're so big, it's crazy. In the UK, we have a legless lizard, which is the slow worm. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
Which is probably our commonest reptile, to be fair.
Really?
And the densities of them are ridiculous.
Wow.
There's certain areas where I put a load of the surveying stuff. So when we survey, we normally have a metal tin of a certain size and also like a black roofing felt square of a certain size. We put two together, GPS it, and then we'll put those all around an area, and then we will survey that area for a year or whatever to see what we find under the tins at the same time of the day. Black roofing felt is like crack cocaine for slow worms. So they can find it for miles and they're under it. And the densities, I mean, under a foot by a foot square, you'd probably find 10 slow worms in the right. It is incredible. They get to about 8 and 14 inches, something like that, maybe a little bit bigger.
Wow.
Yeah, voracious. If you look at the skull of a slow worm, it looks like some prehistoric monster. The teeth are out of all proportion to the size of the animal, and they feed mainly on slugs and snails and that sort of thing, and worms.
Okay.
But yeah, the density of them is incredible, and most older established gardens in the UK, in even semi-rural areas, will have them.
Wow.
Yeah, I literally 5 minutes from my house, I know I will flip something and find some. They're really, really common. If you drop a crisp bag, by the time it's hit the floor, there's about 4 slow worms underneath it. It's that dense. There's slow worms in most of the countries in Europe, but they're different. They're different species, so they look fairly similar. But Italy has its own slow worm. Greece has got its own slow worm. The Peloponnese has got its own slow worm. And then you go into like the Eastern Bloc type areas, so like Romania, Bulgaria, and Macedonia, that sort of area will have its own slow worm. They're slightly
Okay.
bigger. And then you've got the legless skinks, which occur on the Greek islands, such as Castellarizo, Rhodes. They've got a thick legless skink. In fact, Castellarizo has got its own legless skink, which has kind of come over from Turkey, which is outside Europe. And then you've got some of the sort of like blind legless lizards, which look, you've got a similar looking thing in the States, but it's got two little legs at the front.
Right.
Like one of the California species. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Longipips or something like that, maybe. Yep. I can't remember.
Yes.
So we've got 3 species of what we call worm lizards. They're not blind. They have got tiny little eyes, but you can't see them. But they do look kind of like worms. And we've got 3 species of those in Europe, in Spain, and again in Greece. It's
so
fabulous little things.
You have talked about traveling to bunches of different countries, and some of those, not really European, but some of those pop up in the news as not really the maybe safest places to go on vacation. And so how do you navigate that, as far as I want to go here and do this, I'm not really here for touristy, see the pyramids or whatever. I'm here to do something different. The problem being that even in the States, where places where maybe it's not the best city, tourist type things are usually, we don't mess with, you don't mess with those. They're a little bit nicer, so on and so forth, but you don't go elsewhere. The problem being that we want to go elsewhere. We're not going to a theme park. We want to go over here in the woods. And so
not only do we want to go in the woods, we want to go into the woods with thousands of pounds worth of camera equipment.
Yes.
Which well, it's difficult. I mean, there are countries I really want to go to and I've been invited to, but my job stops me from going there or advises me not to go there, which I'm sure you understand.
Yes.
Iran, for example. Some friends of mine did a great trip to Iran, saw the spider-tailed viper.
Right.
Saw the giant cave salamanders they have over there. Just an amazing trip. But for me, it was a no to go there. There's countries that are easy for me to get to in terms of time-wise that have got some phenomenal species, like Algeria, but again, just not really safe for even a small group of people to travel around. It's a hobby. It's not, my job is, as you appreciate, work can be dangerous enough. You don't need to do that in your spare time. And it depends on the species. For me, my great love for European stuff is vipers. We have got some amazing vipers. Such pretty species, really phenomenal. But even then, there's countries where these vipers occur, which can be a little bit difficult. I mean, I've been to Israel twice. I love Israel. I would recommend Israel to anybody as a place to herp. It's the tiniest country in the world. Your backyard is probably bigger than Israel, to be fair. It really is. You can drive from one end of Israel to the other in 3 hours. That's the length of the country. It's got 147 species of reptile and amphibian, I think, in a tiny little country. And they're reasonably easy to find. You've just got to be aware of where you're traveling in that country. Some areas in Israel, as you know, are not the safest of places. But to be fair, once you're inside Israel, and as long as you don't go to places which are on the news all the time, which we all know the names of, once you're out in the desert, there's nobody there. No one's going to bother you. Do you know what I mean? It's super safe because there's literally nobody there. But the infrastructure in Israel, because it's a militarized country, is incredible. So
Right.
even though you are literally in the middle of the desert, there's perfectly lit motor highways, whatever you call them in America, motorways, all the way through the deserts, so that they can land planes and things like that if they need to. Um, so for a herping point of view, it is one of the best countries to herp. The species are fantastic. I mean, in terms of vipers, in terms of lizards, some of the most beautiful lizards. If you look up from Israel, if you look up the Israeli Lacerta, it's a bright bottle green. It's stunning. I was fortunate enough to photograph those. You've got so many big vipers. You've got the Deboya vipers. You've got Bulmuri vipers. You've got some incredible fanfoot geckos, which are huge for a gecko, and particularly in Europe, beasts of things. You know, if you see them in the road, you just drive round them because you're too frightened to go anywhere near them. Bulldogs and geckos. But you've also got tiny little endemic geckos on Mount Hermon, which are no bigger than your thumbnail. It's an incredible place. Some really endemic snakes. You've got Atractaspis, like the black asps. You've got the big black cobras, the Waltronesia, which is one of the strongest snakes I've ever caught in the wild. Like the muscle tone on one of those when you're holding it, it's just incredible. You've got the saw scale vipers out there, which are stunning, absolutely stunning. You've got the telescopus, the cat-eyed snakes out there. And it's such a tiny country that you can just get everywhere really quickly. And it's got really unique splits of habitat. So you've got the mountainous areas, you've got the coastal areas, and you've got the desert areas. So you've got unique habitats, but you can get to each one within a couple of hours. It's like a herper's playground. I can't recommend it enough. There's a couple of really good field guides just been produced by that. If anyone's thinking of going, Chimera have just produced some cracking field guides for there. But of all the countries which are reasonably cheap to get to, and I think even from Israel's quite cheap to get to, for herping, I cannot recommend it enough. So it's full of skinks. Some of the skinks, it's got the shovel-nosed skinks. I don't know if you've seen those.
Yeah.
That burrow through the sand dunes. They've got like a real arrow for a nose.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite herping experiences, I think. Just being out at night in the Negev desert, perfectly quiet, no light pollution at all. The stars are just incredible. And you can see the tracks of either the little telescopus geckos or the sand skinks or, Cerastes, the horn vipers. And you've got Cerastes vipera, you've got Cerastes gasperati, you've got Pseudocerastes fieldi. You've got just some really nice venomous species. And you can literally just see their tracks in the sand and follow them. And then you find the animal. It's just beautiful. And to catch the little sand skinks and just hold them in your hand like this and then put them down and just watch them disappear. And you just think, I know there was something there a minute ago, but literally it's just like they disappear, just burrow through the sand. It's incredible. It's really cool. So get out to Israel. It is a herper's paradise. Egypt is not so easy to herp. It's got some great species. It's not as easy. It's a massive country and it's got its own problems. Again, Jordan at the moment is a great country, but maybe not now is the place to go, the time to go.
Right.
But yeah, if anywhere, if you like, particularly if you like lizards, like geckos and stuff like that, Israel is, do a week in Israel and you'd see so many species. It's not like herp in the States where you've got such a massive area. You might go out for a night and see 3 or 4 animals.
Right.
You're talking, if you're road cruising or if you're out in the desert in the right area, you'd be seeing 50, 60 geckos a night and things like that. It's just amazing.
That's crazy. So you obviously have photographed bunches and bunches of species and have talked a couple of different times about catching things and different stuff like that. How I don't really know how to ask that. Like, how does that work in the because I know in some places handling things and manipulating the animals is a much bigger deal than others, and how all of that works. And so what, I guess, what is your approach to that? Is it,
I,
you, especially if you're flipping, like, if you flip things, it might be hard to get a shot because they're going to bolt or be scared, or, as opposed to
it,
if
it
you
will
can find something
depend.
basking or,
Yeah, it
you know,
depends on the species, and it depends what I'm trying to achieve.
okay,
Um, if it's a species that's new for me off my European list, I obviously want to get a decent photograph of it. So, in all honesty, I'd probably, if it was a lizard, I'd probably try and. Well, see, lizards are difficult because lizards don't sit still to be
right,
photographed. A viper will sit there for hours just looking at you, and you can get amazing photographs of it, and it's all good. Same with amphibians, and a toad will just sit there. You can shoot it from every angle; it doesn't care. But lizards, particularly once they're warmed up, are a nightmare to photograph. So most of the lizard photography I'll do will be um, watching where they bask, sort of identifying where their basking sites are. So when you flush them, maybe you go near it the first time and it will run, but you've watched it and you know that it always sits on that rock in that position too. And then I'll set up my camera, probably with a longer lens, and just wait, literally just sit there for 40 minutes. It will come back, it will bask in that spot again. So that's quite a naturalistic shot. With snakes, they don't tend to come back. Well, if with colubrids, they don't tend to come back and bask in the same place. So if
sure,
it's a snake, in all honesty, they're probably normally caught, positioned, and photographed, and then let go. With the vipers, they do bask in the same sort of positions. So if you do flush one, you'll know it's probably going to come back there and bask. So what you, particularly with vipers in the UK, I don't catch vipers in the UK. I just watch where they bask. I might tidy the basking it once they've gone. I might tidy the basking area up as there's a big flower in the way or there's a twig in the way. I might clean the area up, but I know they're going to come back out there and bask. And again, I'll probably do it with a longer lens.
okay,
But there's no, to be fair, there's no real restriction. In the UK, there's two species which are prohibited from any disturbance at all, and that is the sand lizard. I don't know if you know that, Lacerta agilis.
okay,
Beautiful, very popular in the hobby. A lot of people keep them in Europe and in the States. It's a very chunky species which flares up really green in the breeding season for the males. It's a nice species. And the other one is the smooth snake, which is Coronella osteica, I think. And they're both completely prohibited from any disturbance in the UK. So to get my photographs from them, I volunteer with a scientific survey where they're going to be caught and measured in their particular habitat. So,
awesome,
I'll spend a day catching them and measuring them, but it does mean that I can plonk them down and get a picture when we're releasing them. In other areas of Europe, even the rarest species, I went to see Europe's rarest vertebrate, which is the Penna rock lizard. It's a stunning little lizard. It's only about 4 inches long, 5 inches long, and it's sort of dark brown with blue spots. Cracking little lizard, but its habitat is so small, and it's critically endangered. But even then, there's no real formal protection to prevent you just going there and collecting them if you want, or handling photography or something like that. We didn't. We took long lens pictures again because I think you get nicer, more naturalistic pictures like that. So that's kind of the
okay.
way I'm trying to do everything now. But yeah, in Europe, there's not quite the protection there is in Australia for most species.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's
And
sad. Really. I'll give you an example. Recently, a new species of viper was described in Italy, Wasler's viper, and its range is really small. It's a couple of mountain valleys. It's quite a high altitude species, and it's only found, I think it's in the Piedmont area of Italy. So it's sort of like high altitude, like meadowy type valleys.
Okay.
And it's a cracking little snake. If you look on my Instagram, there's pictures of it. And we did a trip just after it was announced as a species. We did a trip to see it, and we found quite a few. They're not difficult to find in that particular area, and we're photographing them. But there was quite obviously a lot of people had turned up to try and wild collect them for their collections and things like that. And there is now wildlife wardens in those valleys trying to stop people, which is really sad. You shouldn't, it's such a small range for that species. You could easily damage it considerably just by wild collecting it. It's not like taking a snake. It's not like taking an Alterna or something like that, where the range is massive and taking one is not going to hurt anything. If you take 5 of these Wasler's vipers, the area is so small, it's damaging, the reproductive potential of it.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of a fairly unique thing for that. I don't think a lot of people in U.S. herpetoculture realize as much, in that for those West Texas species, and quite a few of the rat snakes too, but in kind of back in the day when herpetoculture, was much more centered on collecting U.S. native animals, and then you're going to be the guy who breeds yellow rats or Alterna or what have you, and how those became really specific to where you're from and locality and things like that. And yet people get it stuck in their head like, oh, you're taking snakes out of the wild or what have you. And then even people that live in the States just don't have a concept of how massive, that population and that range. And, when you talk about West Texas type animals, or you talk about even some of the locality rat snakes, if people get really interested in corn snakes from certain counties in Florida and things like that, it's a massive population in that even the 10 nerds who are interested in it in that part of Florida who collect it, they just couldn't really make a dent, right? There aren't enough of us that are that nerdy to go do that to where it would be an issue. That's where you get into. Sorry, go ahead.
I'd say again, where American and European field herping differs, 2 things. In Europe, while collecting something would be, and that you'd be shunned from society. In 3 decades of field herping in Europe, I have not wild collected a single animal, and I don't know any other serious field herpers that have ever wild collected a single animal. It's just not an ethos. Don't get me wrong, people that keep reptiles and amphibians but don't field herp, they'll wild collect. But actual European field herpers, it's just not an ethos in Europe. It's really shunned. But in the States, it's completely a done thing. I don't have a problem with it in the States because your habitats are so much bigger. Okay. Whereas the European habitats are quite small. And the other thing that differs is the field herpers in the US, they are searching. If you're talking Alterna or Subox or things like that, they're all searching the same areas. They don't think, well, this is good habitat, I'm going to search in this area. They're going to go, oh, this cut is famous for Alterna, I'm going to search this cut. Walk 2 miles up the top there, the habitat's the same, you're going to get probably a lot more snakes, but everyone's focused on historically, oh, this cut is the one.
Right.
And let's be honest, most of these places are only famous because that's probably where they stopped the car for a piss and saw a snake.
Oh,
it's not that the habitat is better than anywhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially West Texas, it has a lot to do with accessibility.
Yeah.
That's where they were allowed to go.
Yeah.
Or what have you. For sure. Absolutely.
But I have no problem if it's sensible wild collecting, I mean, if it's a common species, I don't have a problem because 10 are going to get run over on the roads that night. It's when it's a very vulnerable species, where it's a locality where, like, maybe one of the pine snakes or something like that, where there's the populations are small. People shouldn't be wild collecting then.
The mentality of things like that. So when I was in college, or even before college, when just being a herp nerd who was into this stuff, all the way to now, that's always been a thought stream in U.S. herpetoculture, is that it always feels like we're trying to catch up to European herpetoculture. And so, like in Europe, that was always the thing. In Europe, they had smaller collections than we did, but just banging enclosures. They were amazing. They only had 6 animals, but it would be better than our zoo, right? That was always the stereotype. And then even now, and it wasn't as big of a thing when I was younger, but field herping was more of something I did when I was in college, ecology, and it was based off of classwork, and then I did it for fun as well. And the same thought stream carries forward to now as an adult. In the people, to me at least, how I have seen people in herpetoculture, the people in herpetoculture that would carry the mentality that you are explaining are, and you said it about yourself, so I'm not trying to insult you, are they're older, and they're the generation of people that I looked up to and have now written a book or are kind of retirement-ish age maybe, and they kind of started it how they started what we do, and we're supposedly carrying it on. And then when you talk to those folks, they wanted to do what you do. It's just that our country is humongous, and so instead of traveling to different countries in Europe, they all made the Mecca trip to West Texas. Just their version of, they're just trying to emulate you.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that it's still carrying that way of, oh, we don't do that. Field herpers in Europe don't do that. And it's not it's a real reason of how Europe is cut up in mountain ranges and habitats, and you have a lot of localized small population special things, and the community of folks who are nerdy enough to be into natural history realize that and don't want to mess it up. And then I don't know if it's because we're so broad and expansive, like we just never got it, right? Where what if we collected all of the yellow rats? And it's like, are you an idiot? What? No, stop. Like, and there are pockets of people, when you talk to the Justins and the Phils, and those are all younger dudes, and that they're, but they're like that. Justin got 2 corns from where he's from, and he's happy with that. And Phil wanted a yellow rat from this county because he'd been there and he really likes them. 1.
Yeah.
And they carried that same
100%. And as
respect,
you're so right,
I guess.
I think, and as a sidebar, I'm so happy that people that have a voice in the community, people like Justin and Phil and Lucas, I'm so pleased that generation has got such amazing role models, because there's an awful lot of shite on YouTube from people that aren't quite as clued up as those people. So at least we we have got that. The other thing on the same subject, which is really different, which frustrates the life out of me, and I'm always ragging Eric about this. In Europe, if you are into lizards, say you were into lacertid lizards in Europe, if you were having a conversation with another keeper and you didn't know every Latin name of every single species and every location and every detail, you'd be laughed out of the place. And yet keepers in America often don't even know the Latin name of the thing they're keeping. It's such a weird difference.
Yes.
And what? Sorry, I'm going to have another rant now. You've started.
No, go ahead.
And I'm moaning at Eric. He goes, "Oh yeah, we're going to West Texas. Did you know we've got such and such there?" Yes, I'm not even American, and I could tell you every single species that you have there. Why don't you know this? You're a field herper. You should know everything. It's just a different way of doing things. I mean, not saying either one is right. It just I really noticed the difference between Europeans who will go, "Oh my God, you mean you don't know what the subspecies from that particular village is called? Are you even a real field herper?" To Americans that go, "Oh yeah, there's a yellow snake, love it."
Yeah, yeah, that sucks. It's a huge cultural difference in I don't know how to say that without trashing my own country, but that's fine. It is true, and I have 3 kids, and so I talk to them about this all the time, and we constantly bring it up. My wife and I are nerds, and so we raise 3 kids that are nerds. They don't necessarily fall into the stereotype of being tiny little nerds with glasses because they had parents who don't look like that. But I have that conversation with them all the time of I jokingly call them nerds, and my wife and I the same way, because we are educated people, and the mainstream culture in the United States, usually vastly aided by social media, or sped up, I guess, by social media, has really devalued that.
Yeah.
And that's a societal whole bunch of stuff, but that colors everything, right?
Yeah.
And I pre-COVID traveled a bunch for work, and so I've spent a lot of time in Europe, and even to hang out and talk about how, with my counterparts there, what their kids are doing in school, or how they go through things, and so on and so forth. It's just different, right? And the cultural values and things like that are quite a bit different. And when you distill it down to the thing that we're nerds about, of reptiles and field herping, right? And it just becomes so stark of how, literally how those people were raised and how they were educated, and even the manner and the system in which they were educated and taught how to do things, or how to value things, and which parts are important. And you go to Barnes and Noble here, and there's like 4 field guides in the animals section. It's a shelf about this wide. It's probably got a bunch of books about how to identify flowers in it. And it's commercialized, I guess, in that we live in a time where you have all of the knowledge of human history in your pocket, and the culture of the country that I live in uses it to argue with strangers on the internet and look at cat pictures. And then I want them to take seriously the plight of spadefoot toads, or whatever. And man, that's what I was talking about before, of when I was coming up, the guys that I thought were awesome they told all of us, man, those dudes in Europe, that these super cool enclosures, naturalistic lighting, stuff on timers, on and on and on. And then we all got ball pythons to have sex in a really great way. I don't know where we took a hard left turn. It's weird. It really is. And
I think and another thing, cultural difference. I think in Europe, you are judged on how good you are at your hobby more than you should be. Hobbies should be fun, but there's certain elements in Europe that you've got to be the best at your hobby as well,
Sure.
which, it's supposed to be fun. So I think there should be a balance between it.
Well,
I think,
and we adopted that from you, especially in like look at birding or a lot of natural history hobbies seem that Americans were following a European example. Birding
yeah.
is competitive. If
Oh
you're
my
if
God.
you're a birder, it's competitive.
Oh,
It's not
yeah.
fun. It's
It's
competitive.
not. You want to
And
trash the next person, see that bird, and then I see you haven't stuck you.
yeah,
It's it is. Yeah, they're a different hardcore birders are a different breed. They really are. But carrying on from what you were saying, the other thing, as keepers, there is the way we keep in Europe has been a lot different to how you keep in America. I think now the younger generations, because there's so much YouTube stuff about ball pythons, royal pythons as they should be called, there is a slight move towards keeping in racks and stuff like that. But we've always been more into vivs, and particularly the venomous people kind of led this in terms of how they've gone forward with different lighting and
for sure.
sculpting and stuff like that. And for me, I think everybody, I was having this conversation with Eric off the back of some of the stuff Mike said. I think everybody evolves as a keeper. So, when you first started, probably like me, you had your first snake. And my first snake I ever kept was an American species, believe it or not. First, I had a little ribbon snake, was the very first snake I ever kept. Fantastic.
Wow.
I know, it was really cool. But you get your first snakes and it's brilliant, and you keep it in a little aquarium and you don't really keep it very well. That's your first snake. And then you get slightly better and you read about stuff, and then you're buying a viv, but you're still not doing it particularly good. And then you get better, you get more money, you start getting pairs, you start breeding stuff and selling stuff. Your next evolution from that is, I need every snake in the world.
Yes.
And then you have floor to ceiling racking systems, and you don't ever see anything. All you do is open a drawer, check it, check the water, clean the water, put it back, and bang, 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 bang. And you do that. And I really lost the love for keeping. I had a collection, the height of my collection, I had about 200 snakes, of which probably 40 were venomous. That's time. And,
Yep.
I presume you work the same as me. You work funny hours,
Right.
you work long hours, you work difficult hours. You want to see family, you want to see friends, you want to go and train in the gym, climb, kayak, whatever you want to do. And you're going bang, 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 off it. You lose the joy for it. So I think you go from wanting one or two of every species to then, right, I want less species now, but I want to keep them really well. And I know that's where Eric's at, and that's where I'm at, and a lot of other people. I don't need every species. I want the species that I walk into my snake building, look at them and go, that makes me smile every time I see it. Look at that. And for me now, I'm trying to thin the collection. I've still got quite a few snakes and lizards. I'm thinning them down because I just want bigger vivs. I'm really interested in the best, most naturalistic lighting. It's a thing of mine at the moment. I want to enjoy the sculpting of the vivs. I want to enjoy getting the actual plants from the right area for that snake or lizard or whatever it is. And I want to be able to walk in and look in a viv and it be a little snapshot of that particular habitat. And I don't want to spend all my time doing cleaning up snake toilet or, defrosting rats and mice and things like that. So for me at the minute, I want to get it down to about 30 snakes, probably. My lizards, majority of my lizards now, I've gone to European species and I'm keeping them outdoors, and I'm loving keeping lizards outdoors. Awesome. The difference in the lizards and their behavior is incredible, from keeping them in an indoor viv, even with UVA and UVB, to being in an outdoor enclosure. I'm loving it, absolutely loving it. So I'm limited to the species I can keep like that because obviously I live in the UK, so they've got to be species that are hardy enough to cope with the UK climate. So they're going to be European species from that's sort of like near Europe for me.
Sure.
But I've got like Lacerta bilineata. I don't know if you know that, some of the green lizards from Central Europe. I've got various species of wall lizards, Miralis, and some other species from Central Europe. And the colours pop, man, and the behaviour is brilliant. And it's lovely to sculpt a nice viv outside with natural flowers and things like that. Just so that's kind of where I'm going with those. I've still got Felsumas indoors, which I love. Just incredible, like cartoon animals. It's brilliant. But for my snakes, as I say, I'm thinning out, and I think just having species that every time you see them fill you with joy, and keeping those species absolutely as best you can. And I'm talking absolutely as best you can. Detailed research. Go and see them in the wild, so because until you've seen them in the wild, you don't know 100% that you're getting those features right. It's all very well looking in a book and going, oh, this species should be kept at 84 degrees. Well, until you're standing where you've just seen one of those, you don't know if that's 84 degrees and it's hot, or 84 degrees and it's really wet, humid, or 84 degrees and it's blisteringly dry. Do you know what I mean? It's
right.
So I think the natural evolution is fewer species kept better. And then the top evolution after that is to then go and see those species in the wild and do more field herping and maybe keep the species that you want to see in the wild.
Yeah.
That's just what I'm not saying everyone should do that. That's just kind of where I am and what I think at the moment.
So Scott commented several times, but a little bit back, he asked your thoughts on how things like in the next 10 years would progress as far as Europe and US with social media kind of closing the gap between the two, right? Like it was always something that we were told when I was coming up on how great Europe was. And then I had to go to the forums or in books and stuff to see pictures in different zoos. Cause when I was younger, I had no chance of ever going to see a collection there.
Yeah.
And now American keepers of any age can get on their phone and see all this cool stuff. And then conversely, European keepers can see, for good or bad, that social media sensationalism type stuff, having the coolest morph and can have cultural value, like how cool it can be to have the next fancy rat snake or whatever.
I wouldn't say it's just Europe you need to think about. I mean, I know Scott's in Australia. Thank you for the book, Scott, by the way. Check out Scott's books and Ty's books. Absolutely awesome, especially the lizard one, which he's just sent me. Fantastic. Yep. I think what we're going to hopefully see is a kind of meeting in the middle where people are keeping more naturalistically, but maybe with, not a watering down of the way Europeans keep, but I think we'll have maybe less keeping in racks, maybe bigger vivs. I hope we see people concentrating more on, yes, it survives in a tub. Yes, it will breed in a tub. But people, babies were born in Auschwitz. It doesn't mean that they were having their best life. Right. And I hope people from social media, I hope people are inspired by some of the people that are keeping really nicely naturalistically. I'm not saying everyone should keep bioactively, because I think naturalistically and bioactively completely different things.
Absolutely.
Bioactive, I don't keep bioactively except for some of the lizards, because I don't think, personally, I don't think bioactive works for snakes in terms of the cages we keep snakes in aren't big enough bioactively for the amount of waste they produce.
For sure.
And I think people think, oh yeah, I'm going to keep my rock python bioactively. Yeah, good luck with that. It's going to dump like a horse.
Right.
There's not enough springtails in the world that's going to get rid of that in your little enclosure.
Yeah.
But if you're keeping smaller lizards, I think it works. And dart frogs, it works brilliantly for. I keep my dart frog. I don't keep dart frogs anymore. When I was keeping dart frogs, it works brilliantly.
For sure.
But naturalistically, I hope people are inspired by what people are doing to try the different lighting. Yes, it will survive without UVA and UVB, but you can make it better with UVA and UVB. Full spectrum LED lighting, just the colors look so much better of the stuff you're keeping. They're cheap as chips. I mean, we are so far behind the marine keepers
Right.
hobby. You look at marine keepers, particularly people that keep coral, they will have a piece of coral that costs them $50 in a $2,000 setup. That is what we should strive for.
My wife and I did that before reptiles, and it is
I've had marine tanks,
an exceptional amount of money to go into the setup.
Yeah, I had 2 marine tanks, and I became like a chemist, and I'd be getting up in the night to check water. No, get broken down. I don't have time for this. But I hope that is the way we go. I hope we don't have a swing the other way where everybody thinks I'm going to be a multimillionaire breeding ball pythons. Let's just rack out everywhere.
Agreed. I hope so. Between Europe, Australia, and Asia, I still keep up with a lot of the marine stuff and different fish hobby type things, but and Asia has always been just amazing for that kind of thing. And then actually there are quite a few different folks in Europe that do naturalistic style fish tanks and things like that as well. And to kind of Scott's point, like what I hope happens, and I think it is a little bit now, as especially in U.S. herpetoculture, that the natural light UVB UVA debate is raging really hard, and I think that's awesome because there are enough people that are supporting it to make an argument for the mainstream herpetoculture that doesn't use it, that it is generating debate, which is great. What I hope on the social media aspect, I want the awesome European collections and the Australians that keep parentes outside and just do these amazing things. And then, in especially hugely in Asian culture, it's more fish keeping and marine, but they have a thriving reptile culture as well. It's just really beautiful. It might not necessarily be perfectly natural, but it's very artistic and it's wonderful to look at. And I want those 3 clusters of people to take our level of showing off on the internet. And then, because I know US herpetoculture will consume that content because we do that.
Well, that's great to hear.
I want them to emulate you. I just need more of you to show off in a way that they'll see it.
Europeans are really never show off. They're like, oh, no, it's nothing. Anybody could do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to put it on there. They're very self-effacing. They won't advertise themselves at all.
Right.
Somebody could have, I have a friend, I won't mention his name. I have a friend that has an absolutely amazing collection of rare rattlesnakes in beautiful enclosures. He won't post any. I don't want people. No, it's my thing. I don't want people to know. And yet, if people saw that, they'll be going, "This is amazing. This is how we should be doing it." But they just won't do it. And unfortunately, and I don't want to set Scott off again, but he's exactly the same as me. I've been keeping venomous for decades, as has Scott. The things that are on the internet are the shock value things of absolute, and I won't swear, but absolute idiots doing things with venomous snakes that has no useful bearing whatsoever. But that's what people are eating up at the moment. And that's exactly what we have to move away from.
So I've always thought it was funny that, not funny, it's not good, but the stereotypical joke, right, would be that I'm in America and you're in the UK and freedom, right? You know, that whole thing, and giving people a hard time. And when it comes to venomous specifically, I see people in Europe and in Australia, of course, just due to what lives there. And you guys keep some of the craziest stuff. But, that's also kind of a stereotypical, like, joke type thing too, but in a really serious way, right? And it, when you get into those like stereotype jokes of like, yeah, America, like fun loving freedom and stuck up British people or whatever, we lose a lot of those freedoms really fast because those fun loving idiots screw up. And then it's like, oh, it's like super serious in Europe and they know all the Latin names and, you know, da da da. And yes, they do, because they're keeping a bunch of things that can kill you. And it's just, it is serious. Like, it's fun and they're beautiful. And I love to play with snakes and I get snakes out with my kids and so on and so forth. And educating kids is what I do. I am that guy that just plays with frogs and it's fun. That is the part of herpetoculture that's serious, because that's the part of herpetoculture that can, at depending on species, end your life. And so there is that level of respect, you know, and it goes back to the same thing, field herping and enclosures, and that's just what it feels like to me is a respect thing. And I think we got this weird cultural thing in our head of like America and you guys are all stuck up in Europe and to have all your scientific names and you're so old and stodgy or whatever. And I don't know. I don't know how we get people past that and that's what I mean by I want more of those guys to show off of they're not going to get out and free handle and do some stupid YouTube video.
Yeah.
But their enclosures are just mind-boggling, and the animals themselves are still the same amazing animals. And if our America YouTube culture could find value in a beautiful island rattlesnake in this guy's enclosure in Germany that he doesn't ever touch or mess with, it's just awesome. I don't know. We're stuck in this weird disconnect where we don't value the right part, and somehow what I see is like the European mentality of just being more respectful of it, I guess, or more respect for those animals. Like, I don't know where we don't value that or why. Like, that really bothers me to whenever I talk to people I know in Europe and talking to more folks in Australia, especially in Australia, you kind of have to have respect for things because they live in a place where things can kill you. It's a weird disconnect. I don't know.
Yeah, and another major difference between Europe and America is, particularly lizards or snakes, I can get hold of anything practically, like anything, whereas you're quite limited on the species that are available in the United States.
For sure, yes.
Right? And I don't know if I don't think it's good that I could, probably make 3 phone calls and have one of the most endangered species in the viv in my building. I don't think that's a good thing, but it's just the culture. In Europe, everything is available. When we go to the big shows like Ham or Houghton, particularly the venomous stuff, I can't think of any species of European viper that I can't just buy off the table. Any species, and that includes Vipera acini, which is I'm not sure that's a good thing, but that's just it makes me laugh so much when I listen to other American podcasts and they're going on about the lineage of this came from this snake, which came from, no one cares. We'll just get a wild caught one. You know what I mean? It's really strange.
Right.
Even I'll give you an example. Offered recently was Pseudocerastes arachnoides, the spider-tailed viper.
Whoa.
Buy those. That shouldn't be happening. But they're advertised. You can buy them.
Wow.
They're not cheap, but
Well, I would imagine.
but you can buy them. That's terrible. I mean, some of the rare lizards that you can just walk into a show. The New Zealand geckos, the beautiful jewel geckos from New Zealand. You shouldn't be able to just buy those. Some of the rare Middle Eastern lacertids that you can just buy at it's naughty. I mean, it's great for the hobbyists. Don't get me wrong. I'm always winding Eric and people up, just saying, oh, what do you want? I can get it, and they go, oh, we can't get that species, but I hope. I think it should be a little bit more controlled than it is. You can pretty much get anything in Europe, any species. It's there's even a lot of Australian species that have never been officially exported, legally exported from Australia, available in Europe at any one time. It's a big market. A lot of rare species, birds, mammals, and reptiles and amphibians go through Europe.
Yeah, for sure. So we are cruising past an hour and a half, and you had already mentioned checking out your Instagram, and I really, really want folks to. That's other than all of the societal things we've discussed. I really want folks to take away from that. Like, I want them to seek out your photography because you have had encounters with so many species that even as we were talking here tonight, I didn't say anything, but it as you were describing things, there are definitely going to be people that listen to this that are like, oh, I wonder where that's at. And you definitely listed off places that I don't think folks even, it doesn't occur to them that someone would even go there or find a snake or find a lizard. So where can folks see your photography?
Well, I'm going to be perfectly honest. My Instagram, I'm very lazy, not lazy. I have photographed all but 6 European species and most of the subspecies. They're not online at the moment. It's a big project that I'm going to do. When I finish the Euro list, I will put them on Instagram. They can get me at Nipperreed on Instagram, and there are photos of some of my trips on there. But what's on there is not even 1% of the photographs I have.
That's insane because I've seen your Instagram. that's crazy.
It's going to be a full-time job to sit down and catalog everything. All this, I want to catalog all the species I've seen in Europe and then put them on Instagram. So yeah, have a look. There's some pictures on there. They're okay. You have to remember that I go on trips with people like Frank de Chanel, who goes by the name of Frank Cannon on Instagram. And if you've seen his pictures, don't look at my pictures. look at Frank's pictures. What Frank deletes as the worst picture he's ever taken is what I'm aspiring to. To be honest, he's amazing. But you can have a look at my pictures on Instagram. There are some trip photos on there, but there is a shed load more to come.
Nipper's Guide to the Herps of Europe. Scott says he would buy one.
Oh, that's very kind. But my great chums that I go on my trips with have already just written the book, haven't they? So it's been done. I've got photographs in it, but there is a good guide. If anybody is thinking of herping Europe, do check out the guide by Jeroen Spraybock and Bobby Bock and Walter Boekmeyer and Jan van der Wart. It's a great guide, some lovely illustrations and some really good photographs in there.
Awesome.
But the other thing is, it seems like I'm ragging on America, and I'm not. I love America. I really want to go to America. But Americans don't seem to herp outside of America very much, other than Australia.
True.
which I get why you want to go to Australia, but Europe has got some of the most amazing species of lizards. I mean, our lacertas are stunning. You've got all the rock lizards, you can go to some really interesting places like Montenegro to see the rock. There's 3 species of endemic rock lizard that you only find in Montenegro, and you've got to go really high up in the mountains and find the actual mountain slopes that they're endemic to. But they're beautiful. I mean, we've got lizards that are endemic to only on certain islands like Skyros. There's lizards that only occur on Skyros. There's lizards that only occur on Pori. You've got the Peloponnese rock lizards that they're only found in that one mountain chain, and each mountain in that mountain chain has its own lizards on it. It's beautiful. We've got X amount of species of vipers, from the tiny little Ursinus viper to the great big Montiviperas and Macroviperas and stuff like that. And Europe's easy to travel around, and it's super safe. Northern Europe is super safe. Eastern Europe's a little bit sketchy, but Northern Europe's super safe to travel around, and cheap. And then you've got the Near East. You've got like Saudi Arabia. You've got Jordan. You've got Egypt. You've got Israel. All get out there. Go and
I don't know. That's another weird cultural thing, right? In that, I think as folks discover field herping or become more involved in field herping, in the US at least, it's Florida and West Texas, right?
Yeah,
and you get really set on that. And yeah, I don't know. I do think, or at least from what I've heard folks talk about, it seems like a lot of American folks that get into herpetoculture get really into the tour part of it, or like trying to go to Costa Rica or trying to go on tours, I guess. It seems to be very popular here, as opposed to just jumping off and trying to go on your own.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how that kind of came to be.
I think if it's an efficient and it's an easy option, isn't it? If you've got a limited amount of time, someone can take you around and show you some species, which is great. I've got no problem with that. But I mean, I am a geek. I like the process of planning a trip, doing the research, even the simple logistics of how much petrol are we going to have? Are we going to get there? Where are we going to eat? Where are we going to sleep? What we're doing this day, what we're doing that day. And that in itself is part of the fun for me, or actually organising a trip. Where the target species are, what we're going to find in each area. I just think people think it's going to be really difficult. It's not anymore. You've got the internet. You can see, what hotels, what the terrain's like, what the weather's going to be like at the click of a mouse. You don't need to do. It's not like the old days when you had to do proper research. You can do it all, in the comfort of your home with a cup of tea. You can plan a whole trip, and I think that's fun. I think people just don't necessarily have the confidence to jump in and do that.
For sure, absolutely.
But once you're used to doing it, not every trip is going to be massively successful. You've got to take on, I've had trips where we've seen hardly anything in a trip, and you've got to take that on board. And that's not a problem with you. There's too many other factors. There's weather, time of year, weather, any number of environmental factors. I've also had trips where we've ticked every species we want to see in about 3 days. That's part of it. If it was easy, there'd be no point to it, would there? I mean, anyone could do it,
right?
But anybody, just get out there. It will change if you're keeping a certain species, particularly if you're keeping an American species. Go and see that species in the wild. I guarantee you, it will change how you keep that species. 100%.
Absolutely.
100%. I keep rattlesnake. I keep Cistrurus, and I cannot wait to see the habitat in the wild. It's all very well me looking at photographs, and I bore the whatever off of Phil, asking him questions because he finds them all the time. Oh, what was it like? What was it sat on? What grasses are growing there? What's the temperature like underneath there? But it's not the same as actually finding that species in the wild. So I would just recommend to anybody, get out there. And particularly with your lizards, whatever genus of lizards you're into, how could you keep that? Whether you're into Chinese cave geckos or I don't know, alligator lizards, bronio, whatever you're into, why would you not want to go and see that in the wild? I can't get my head around it. You know, if I've got a passion to keep that species, I'd much rather go and see it in the wild. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I just I don't care whatever species you're keeping. I can't imagine not wanting to see that actually going about its natural business and trying to, and then you have such a good idea of what its requirements are. Because I guarantee you, anyone, I'll give you an example. I love Pituophis. I keep Pituophis. I think they're fantastic colubrids, and I keep them at home. And I guarantee you, anyway, it frustrates the life out of me how I see people on YouTube keep Pituophis, pull a drawer out. There's a 7-foot ball snake in a 2-foot tray. Oh yeah, she's doing fine. Shuts the drawer. I want to hunt them down and do bad things to them. But I guarantee if those people went and saw a pine snake or a gopher snake or a ball snake in the pine barrens, they'd never keep it like that again. You know,
yeah, one of the more collectible, I guess, types of bull snake is the Kankakee bull, and that's about 20 minutes that way from my house.
Okay, I'm packing my bag now. I should be going on the next one.
Yeah, it is, bull snakes, racers are pretty common out there, colubra constrictor, and a lot of different things. And it's, it follows the Kankakee River. There's a big state park over there, and it's wide open, forested, riverine habitat. And yeah, it's one of the largest North American snakes, period, are Pituophis. And yeah, it's a little crazy to me how, and of course, that kind of pushes off morphs and stuff too, where they've become fairly popular lately. And yeah, to see them kept like that, like that's so nuts.
Conversely, tortoises. I don't know how popular European tortoises are in the States, whether people keep European tortoises in the States. Is that a
for
thing?
Sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I was in Macedonia, and tortoises are fairly common in Macedonia. And people, are keeping their tortoises and they're having this much food every day and blah, blah. The area these tortoises live in, if they feed once every 2 weeks, it would be amazing. Yeah, it's just go and see the stuff in the wild. It's so different. I've never seen, snakes I keep. I purposely don't keep anything European because for the reason that I don't want anybody to be able to say, "Oh, you wild collected that."
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The only difference is recently I've got captive bred outdoor lizards, but I've got the paperwork to say they're captive bred. So my lizards kept outdoors are European but captive bred. But prior to that, I've never kept anything European, so people can't say that I've wild collected anything like that. But I see people that keep leopard snakes and ladder snakes and things like that, and they're these big, huge snakes, and they're really fat. I've seen loads of leopard snakes in the wild. Never seen a fat one. Everything is overfed. Everything is, it comes from Spain. It must be kept really hot. Well, if you see where these snakes are, they're often in river valleys that are actually quite cool and humid. Yeah, the rest of it is really hot. But when you're down in the river valleys, and you need to go and see that to understand how you're keeping your stuff.
Absolutely. And on the field herping subject, you are also involved in a podcast on this subject.
This is very true.
That?
It's a new podcast. Eric and I were talking. We're both really passionate about our field herping, and we just wanted to do a podcast that was just field herping. We wanted to do it in a slightly different way, not necessarily just a guest on speak to that guest. So that it's quite an edited podcast. But yeah, we've done one. The first one we did was on accidents, what could go wrong when you're field herping. I've had a number of incidents. Scott's on there. Scott was telling us about some incidents he had, and some various other people. We interviewed Lou Boyer. Do you know Lou? You familiar with Lou?
That was amazing.
What a legend. I love Lou. He's just like, I hate him really, because he's just like the coolest bloke in the world. You know what I mean? He not only is he an airline pilot and a great surfer, he just does mad field herping, you know, and he flies, it's mainly Asia, but he flies around the world on somebody else's dollar. And instead of sleeping like any sane human being would, he goes out field herping, and he just finds these great Japanese or, you know, Singaporean snakes or whatever. It's just brilliant.
Absolutely. And that whole episode, he was so, I don't know, like casual. Like, yeah, you know, and I went here. I go to Japan a couple times a month. I go to Singapore a couple times a month. And I found a coral snake. I don't think anybody else had ever seen it. That was pretty cool. Like, he was just so...
He's so laid back. Yes, he's such a cool guy. We've just finished. It's just about to drop in the next day or so. An episode with Professor Mark O'Shea, one of my absolute heroes. Yeah. I chat to Mark, and I've put one of his books. He's got some of my pictures in, and so he's just such a good bloke. But he was on one of the
wait, which book?
Snakes of the World.
Yes.
The Book of Snakes.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you seen the Book of Snakes?
Yes.
Have a look at the blunt-nosed viper. It's the best pictures in there, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah, those are some pictures I took in Cyprus.
Awesome.
Yeah. So he was one of the first, apart from doing, he did O'Shea's Adventures. And
sure, yeah, of course.
Stuff. And the reason I like Mark so much is there's no BS with him at all. When he goes out on a field trip, even if it's being filmed, if he doesn't find anything, he doesn't find anything.
Yep.
He's not doing the Austin Stevens, let's take the snake out the freezer, put it on the ground and pretend we've just found it, and then wrestle around with it for no reason type thing. All his stuff is absolutely genuine. If he doesn't find it, you won't see it. If he finds it, he's actually just found that field herping. And he's, he's gnarly as he's been bitten so many times, and he crawls through rubbish to find that he's a really sound chap. And he's so, even now after decades, he's so passionate about what he does. He's discovered so many species. He's had species named after him. He's actually just got the MBE, which is very cool, member of the British Empire. But yeah, wow. we had a chat with him, and he was telling us about one of the first expeditions to find the rough scale python, when he was actually on it, and they found, I think, number 5 and 6 of the initial rough scale pythons. Incredible.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, he was so interesting to talk to. In fact, we talked to him for so long that we're going to have a separate episode with him talking about Papua New Guinea and the species he discovered there and all that sort of stuff.
That's so cool.
He is a legend. And then we're just about to record one next week with Matt Wilson, who is a really good British field herper. He lived in Thailand for 2 years, and he just herped Thailand constantly. So it's absolutely brilliant. And he's now in Egypt working, and he's field herping in Egypt. But he's also he's like an expert, for want of a better word, on field herping the Greek islands. So he loves his lizards.
Oh, cool.
So you should have him on at some time.
Yes.
But yeah, so we're going to talk to him about herping Thailand. So yeah, if you're into your field herping, folks, check out Field Herping Podcast. It's on the usual platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those good places, SoundCloud.
Yeah. And it is a different style. How Eric does the editing, which it's actually really cool if you're used to listening to a podcast like this of two folks just chatting. It's a really neat method to do it. And yeah, I'm so happy you guys got to talk to O'Shea. That's so cool.
If you can get him on, don't get me wrong, he's super busy because he's pretty famous.
Oh, and,
but you could just listen to him for hours. Yeah, he's discovered so many species. He's herped in countries where people just can't go.
Right.
He's just fantastic.
The funny thing is that, just to give Mark O'Shea another plug, not that he needs one from me, but how I got one of his books and actually was then talking to him about a lizard book that he wrote. I just messaged him on Facebook, and like that is one of the coolest parts of social media is.
I agree. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously it took a little while. He's a really busy dude, but
yeah,
he messaged me back and was like, "Oh yeah, here's how you get the book, and I'm writing a lizard book. You should check this out." And we just talked about his lizard book. Like when you talk to him, he's just some guy. Like he's very personal.
So down to earth. When you think, a lot of people that have discovered as many species as he's discovered will be quite, maybe snooty, but he's not. He's the most down to earth. He's so excited about what you're doing. Oh, where have you been herping? What have you seen? Oh, really good. That's cool. Did you get the lizard book? Did you get his new lizard book?
I absolutely did.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, we just cruised past 2 hours, so we will wrap it up.
Well, thank you very much, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm glad that, like I was, before you came on, I was saying how that I had joined the Herpetoculture Network guys, and it's really expanded how many folks listen to the podcast because, they already had quite a big viewership and things like that. Yeah. And especially for lizard nerds, I didn't think that field herping was as prevalent as it should be. And so I'm super glad you commented on that Facebook post and we connected. That's awesome.
That's cool.
So, all right.
But yeah, we will no doubt chat a lot offline at some point.
For sure.
100%.
All right.
Great. Have a great night. I'll see you later.
Okay. Bye.
Cheers.
All right. That was episode 20. Nipper's awesome. I've heard him on a bunch of podcasts, like I said before. I'm so glad that folks like Scott ended up in the chat who also have just tons of experience field herping and getting to talk the whole European versus American mentality. I think is a great conversation in herpetoculture that I hope that more folks have. And with Mike Stefani, who constantly shows up in the chat and is really pushing, naturalistic enclosures, keeping monitors in what I think is the probably best way. It's a great blending of the two. If you've ever met Mike, he's definitely an American dude, and he is keeping monitors in what would historically be considered kind of a European way. And I'm really glad to see a blending of the two. I strongly encourage you to check out Nipper's Instagram. Hopefully he finds the time in his busy schedule to update us with his European list because it's absolutely ridiculous. And really check out the podcast. We kind of make jokes with the whole Herpetoculture Network NPR thing. And, it's not competitive. Like, those are all really cool people. I've said this before, that there's a reason that we all in some way congregate together, in the live chat of Snakes and Stogies, or, the live chat of Carpets and Coffee, the folks in the Reptile Gumbo podcasts. Like, I think the personalities, the quality of people, it's kind of all attracting like-minded folks to it. And I'm really happy to see that continue. And, Nipper has, of course, talked to the Herpetoculture Network guys. He's talked to the NPR guys, and now he's here talking with me. Scott and Ty have been really involved in both of those crews. And Ryan Cox said, hey, from Daytona, he is always in those chats. Mike Stefani, all these different people. And, there's a reason that those people all congregate together, and they're all doing awesome stuff. So if you are a person who is new to the live, or you are new to listening to the podcast, I would encourage you to check out some of the chats, see what everybody's talking about in Snakes and Stogies, see what everybody's talking about in Carpets and Coffee. Even if you maybe don't have the time to listen to the 19 different podcasts we all have, show up in a live chat, talk to people, and I wasn't joking about Facebook messaging people. I straight up Facebook messaged Mark O'Shea. He answered me and told me about his cool lizard book, and then I got it. People are very accessible, and we all seem to be of similar mindset, and it's really cool to be involved in this expanding group of people. I hope that this is my brand of nerd. Like this is the herpetoculture I want to be involved in, and I think we're kind of pushing out into the rest of herpetoculture and hopefully helping them see how cool this can be, right? Like you can do stuff the quote unquote right way, or I think it's the right way, ethically and morally, and we all seem to have similar thought processes on how to do things, and hopefully we can kind of continue to push that influence to the folks who are new to this and maybe don't have a community yet. Ball them up, stick them in the Snakes and Stogies chat, bring them to Carpets and Coffee. They can talk to the Starbucks nerds or whatever. I think it'd be really cool. So I'm glad you guys hung out, and I have a whole list of folks all the way through November. It's going to be cool. One of my Sundays actually falls on Halloween. That might just be Teresa and I. I can almost guarantee it'll be in costume if we do it at 8 o'clock. Maybe we'll do a little earlier depending on when our kids trick or treat, but it will for sure be in costume. So if you want to show up to the live chat and have it be ridiculous, Halloween's going to be fun. And I have a wonderful assortment of people that have kind of come out of the woodwork of when I message folks and ask them. People are really excited to come hang out and talk. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're actually cruising toward a year of me doing this every 2 weeks. Episode 26 will hit a year. So that's pretty cool. So thanks for hanging out this long. I know this one went a little long, but I just want to listen to Nipper talk. And so hopefully you guys wanted to listen to him talk too. So, all right. Good night.